Apparently, I imagine Boeing ended up getting their money.
Boeing, I believe Jeff Stein said there's a national security provision that is giving Boeing I think $17 billion. Yep.
Well, Boeing chief executive David Calhoun yesterday was on Fox Business Network, and we do have the Boeing clip. Okay, yeah, here's the clip of David Calhoun. This is just sort of like, it's really stunning, because, well, let's play the clip, and you can check here and give me your impression of it. But this guy, David Calhoun, is CEO. Remember, just a little backstory on Boeing. They, instead of redesigning their 737 MAX commercial airplane, what happened was airports around the world changed the way that they would build their walkways so they could maximize space at the airports. And the walkways were such that the way that Boeing's planes were designed, their engines were positioned in the wrong way. And to accommodate these new walkways, they had two choices. One choice was redesign their planes to make a big investment in their whole fleet so that they wouldn't have this issue. The other was to do sort of like a small structural tweak and then make up the rest in software that would change the way that the planes, they could do a little bit of fixing and retrofitting on these planes, but that would require, in certain circumstances on the 737s, to have, because of the way they were designed, have a specific software that had them, change their flight pattern a little bit when they land, something to that effect. But it was basically, they wanted to avoid having to spend money in the redevelopment of their planes to make them actually function in the way that they're supposed to function, because that would have gotten in the way of their massive stock buybacks. And again, we're back to stock buybacks. And the problem is not just it's not just the fact that when you buy back your stocks, it is stock manipulation. The problem is that this is the way the CEOs and the board of directors get paid. And it's also the way that they basically bribe their shareholders to allow them to get paid this way.
It's also great. Every time you hear some talking point from like a John Mackey, who's like, hey, I take $1 a year. I mean, I don't know what John Mackey's stock buybacks are, so maybe I shouldn't use him as an example. But anytime these guys talk about, I'm taking a pay cut, or I as CEO or whatever, we receive this salary, that's not telling you the full story of how compensation works at these companies.
Oh, absolutely. They get compensated. Very often, the majority of their compensation is through stocks that ultimately vest, or bonuses that are a function of the stock price.
Right.
And they get that money, it's taxed at a lower rate because it's capital gains.
Yep.
And so they're running like a cottage industry, like a side business. It's almost like, Michael and I are playing, poker. Michael, Matt, and I are playing poker, and Brendan's on the side going like, I got a side bet. But I get a side bet with both of them, and I can look at their cards. And that's basically what's going on. And, he's just putting down like, oh, Michael's going to win this one. I'll bet you $5. And he's looking at the cards.
Right.
That's what's going on. And it's perverting the incentives of these companies. So they do stuff like, and you get stuff like the 737 MAX. And here's this guy now, apparently he needs a bailout, but not so bad.
The idea that government will have an equity.
I don't have a need for an equity stake. I don't. That's never what we've been.
I know, but if they force it, but do you think they would force it as a counterbalance to assistance?
Yeah, no. If they force it, we just look at all the other options, and we've got plenty of them. So it's not. It's just not ideal for us or our suppliers and all of those companies spread throughout the United States. It's not ideal if we don't have it. But if they attach too many things to it, of course you take a different course.
Okay.
So in
no
other words, you're saying-
bailout. No bailout.
Yeah. I mean,
No bailout.
if you're in a position where you're like, well, if they're going to actually require something in return for this money, we've got plenty of other options. Well, then why are you here with your hand out? If you got plenty of other options, you know what I say? Use them. Take them. Don't take my tax dollars. I don't need my tax dollars to make sure that you can make more money. If I don't care how important your business is, if you're just sitting up there telling us that what we got other options, well, here's what I would suggest. Exercise those other options, because those tax dollars can go somewhere else for where there are no other options. Like somebody who hasn't money to pay their rent, somebody who doesn't have the money to pay for their food, somebody who doesn't have the money to pay for their medical bill.
I mean, it's outrageous. And again, this is, in a world of the proper functioning democracy, frankly, this would have been larded up. Any bailout package would have frankly had it would have had equity stakes. It would have had, I want to see, particularly in the airline industry, I want to see worker boards. I want, at least half the boards, if not more workers. I want to see, an end to stock buybacks, all of these things. And then if a company actually is like, all right, we need it, then okay, you've earned yourself a bailout. I believe you. Exactly.
I mean, you got to put, that the way that you filter out as to who really needs this is you put onerous obligations on that money.
That's it. It's as simple. I mean, it's like kind of like, it's like I don't even know what the analogy is, but it's like, hey, I want you to, I don't know, lend me 30 grand. There'll be oversight and I'll get it back to you at some point in the future. It's totally unenforceable. And if you make me say, if you make me sign a contract that I'm using it for what I'm saying I'm using it for, I got other options. Bye.
Exactly. One last thing. This piece by Jordan Weissman in Slate on who we specifically should not bail out. And I'm quite convinced there must be some cruises that go to like some type of Trump resort or something. But
Totally.
He was basically said like he was happy to bail out airlines, hotel industries, et cetera, et cetera. And I should say airline. My daughter keeps texting me. She's worried about the Wi-Fi here because it cut out. And I'm just going to tell her, I know it has been, sweetie. Oh, wait, I just tried to do it. Hold on, let me just tell her right now, just so she stops texting me. It's fine now. This is a little bit distracting. In fact, I've stopped my show, so please stop. I love you.
Oh, that's good. Well done.
That's the way you got to do it.
Well done.
And okay, so bailing out the cruise industry, which I am sure Donald Trump is keyed in on because there's no the Carnival pulls up at Mar-a-Lago or whatever. I'm sure there's something like that. I'm sure of it. First off, not only was apparently like the cruise liners, as it is for a lot of these type of things, sort of like ground zero, as it were.
They're
spreading cesspools. Well, Petri dish is really the more. I think
they're Petri dish. That's right.
And what was amazing, which I was not aware of, is that they completely dropped the ball on doing any type of screening. In fact, it gets worse than that. So after it was clear that coronavirus was spreading around the world, passenger screening was limited. Now, everybody knows, like, norovirus. Like, I didn't even know you could catch that off a boat. Like, I didn't even know it existed off a boat. This is where people get these things. And even on cruises where officials knew of positive tests, such as the Grand Princess, strict quarantines confining passengers to their rooms were not imposed immediately. Inconsistent deboarding procedures also meant thousands of passengers who traveled on a ship that had carried a passenger who tested positive for the coronavirus went home with little or no medical screening, possibly taking the virus back to their communities.
You can't confine people on karaoke night, Sam.
Exactly.
Be reasonable.
This is even worse. This is even worse. After initially insisting that no restrictions were needed, in recent days, this is from Politico, the cruise industry has presented a plan to the White House to bar the elderly from cruising over coronavirus risks. That's great. But Politico reported, but that hasn't stopped some sales managers from using dubious sales tactics, including Norwegian Cruise Lines, which reportedly encouraged sales reps to lie about to potential customers with fantastical pitch lines. Quote, the coronavirus can only survive in cold temperatures, so the Caribbean is a fantastic choice for your next cruise.
The Cuban doctors are getting deployed. Like Jamaica has, I don't know how, maybe 100 cases now. They just reported in Haiti. It's in Dominica. Oh my.
But I mean, can you imagine?
That's just incredible. That is criminal. It's criminal. I don't even know what else to say about that.
Apparently, this was a list of talking points put together by sales managers in the Miami office. This is according to the Miami New Times. Now, like you say, if this is true, this is criminal. And well, like the idea that like, what if people just catch it on the way down to the cruise? Like, you know, or like in the first, like when you leave, like it's just
the
absurd.
the heat trails from the Caribbean coast automatically attach themselves to somebody as soon as they book a Caribbean cruise, and it creates a buffer so that zone. There's on the way down to the boat, you're actually getting propelled by a Caribbean breeze that protects you from all viruses.
And one wonders if Trump didn't say, you know, it wasn't like a consulting on this. It's going to be warm. So
yeah, it's warm. You don't get it.
You don't get
That's it. Why nobody from Jamaica's ever died of a virus.
Never. He goes on, and then this part, which I did not know either. The three top cruise lines, Carnival, Royal Caribbean, and Norwegian, are all based in Miami. They flag their ships in foreign tax havens like Panama, Bermuda, and Liberia, which allows them to avoid U.S. corporate taxes and do an end run around domestic labor laws, which is why apparently they have few Americans working on the ships because their labor practice is so crappy that they can only get folks from like the Philippines who are willing to, you know, deal with those kind of like horrible work conditions.
It's like borderline indentured servitude. It's horrible.
An investigation by Univision and Columbia University's journalism school referred to them as sweatshops on the high seas. So,
let's bail them out.
I mean, and Wiseman says like, let them go bankrupt. Let them go bankrupt and have, hedge funders pick them up. And then if they want protection in the future, they're going to have to sort of work within a greater regulatory scheme and start paying taxes. Why should we bail out companies that aren't even American?
They're also, by the way, I mean, the environmental footprint of those things are shocking. I mean, they are so environmentally destructive. And and again, it's not like we all need to fly less and we need to redesign, you know, the airline industry needs to be more efficient. There needs to be less flights, all of that. But we know like there are going to be flights in the world, right? Like that's something that we're going to manage. This can be something that's just completely eliminated. It's like, okay, yeah, you can't eat a kebab on the high seas during Aladdin night while you terrorize like an undocumented worker in a cruise that's polluting like the Caribbean Ocean and causing more greenhouse gas emissions than an airliner. Like, let's just not do that. Let's stop.
Let's hit this the DPA briefly, and then we'll go to the fun half.